Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Law and Finance Show, and today we have another great guest on. Now, one of the things when you think about a criminal law attorney, I mean, sometimes people don't always connect the dots and say, hey, that person is a very honest person. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about interviewing our guest for today, because that's one of the things that he wants his clients and he wants people to know about him, and it is a reputation that he's building, as well as building a reputation of being a phenomenal lawyer in that space and running a law firm in the space of criminal law. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me welcome my guest, David. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Hi, Darrell. How are you?
I am great. I'm great. So I'm very interested in talking about, your firm and the great things you guys are doing for criminal law defense. But before we jump into that, can you tell those that aren't familiar with you a little bit about your background?
Well, I was born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky. Then I went to the university in Atlanta at Emory. Then I went to acting school in New York for about a year, New York City. And then I went to University of Miami Law School after that. And actually, the 24th of August was the 30th year anniversary of Hurricane Andrew. And that was the day I was supposed to start law school. But instead, Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida. And so we didn't start until about 2 weeks later. But I've been in Miami for about 30 years.
Wow. Now, what I will say is I've talked to a lot of lawyers, and you usually don't hear like that background story of I grew up in Kentucky. Usually when someone says they grew up in Kentucky, you don't expect them to say, I moved to Atlanta, I went to, acting school, then I went to law school.
Right.
So like, what caused I guess, what led you to go the path you did, kind of navigating your own journey?
Well, I mean, going back to, where I came from and my upbringing, I'm Jewish. My last name is very Jewish, obviously, Edelstein. So you can imagine there's not a ton of Jewish people in Kentucky. I was always one of maybe two or three in my class. So, it's a very tight-knit kind of Jewish community. So my parents, were not from there. My parents, my dad's from New York, my mom's from Ohio. So I didn't have deep, roots going back in Kentucky. So that may shed some light on why, I may have gone where I've gone, to different places for school. Partly, I think when I went to college, I wanted there to be more Jewish people, because I hadn't been around, any growing up really. So, being in the minority yourself, it's nice to be around other people that, you feel comfortable with from the same background. And so I wanted to have that experience because I didn't have it really growing up. So I wanted to see what that was like. And I just wanted to be in a more diverse place, just generally, with all kinds of people, So I went to Emory. I got interested in acting about my junior year. I got bit by the bug, auditioned for a play. And then I, continued acting through the rest of college. And then I was, I'm off to New York. I wanted to be an actor, and I went to acting school. Basically, I deferred admission to law school at University of Miami. I didn't. It was very daunting, the uncertainty of being a working actor. So I think that's what kind of deterred me and made me take the path that I ended up taking.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm curious about with, going from you were in place first and then went into acting school, was there anything about like the techniques or just what you learned in acting school that surprised you compared to your experience of acting in plays first?
Um, so wait, you're quite so okay. So in acting school versus just having acted in
Hmm.
plays.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and let me, let me give the caveat that I did acting after law school, and I
Mhm.
studied acting more, and after about a 15-20 year hiatus, I started again this past year. So but I was young and dumb. I was 22. I was in a hurry. you know I don't think I was fully present, to take in, everything that was around me at that time, when I was in New York. Um, but as you know, I've learned a lot later in my life, is what I'm saying. But I guess movement, voice, the importance of, uh, I guess the technique, and then there really was
Mhm.
a method to it, and it wasn't just winging it. Pretty
Mhm.
much, I've learned a tremendous more, since I've been in Miami than I did when I was, up there for that year.
Gotcha. Awesome. Now, so what was it about law school that really, kind of interest you? I mean, was becoming a lawyer something that you had kind of always wanted to do, or where did that come in with your
Um,
story?
th- I never wanted to be a lawyer. It's not something that I imagine myself doing. It was kind of like I was fortunate enough that my parents were going to pay for my education. They paid for my college, and they were going to pay for my graduate school. They weren't going to pay for me to be a struggling actor, in New York City. So, um, anyways, uh, I forgot your question.
Well, I was thinking, what really drove the decision
Oh,
of becoming a lawyer?
look, I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I needed, growing up, everybody had told me, my parents told me, that, everybody, family, friends, relatives, hey, a law degree is great education, even if you don't practice. I heard that over and over again, and I think it's true. Having gone to law school, but I never, wanted to be a lawyer. I wasn't one of those kids that, argued nonstop to the parents, and they said he should be a lawyer, and I was not that kid. But I came to it kind of later. I just found it. I found criminal law in particular the most interesting to me, as opposed to business and corporate and all that kind of stuff. But I actually liked law school. I found it intellectually uh, stimulating,
Mhm.
and I was kind of pleasantly surprised because I didn't know what to expect.
Mhm. Gotcha. No, I guess as you kind of navigated through law school, you mentioned about like, just finding interest in criminal law. Was it kind of before you finished law school that you had kind of decided like, hey, I want to go down the criminal law path, or did that kind of happen like after you had worked in some other areas?
Right. No, it was during law school. They have a very good litigation skills program at the University of Miami School of Law, and they have programs set up with the prosecutor's office and the public defender's office where you can be a certified legal intern after your second year, and you're basically allowed to do everything an attorney can do, as long as you're supervised there with either the prosecutor or the public defender. So I did that summer of second year, and then during the third year, I think I may have continued, just kind of part time there. So it started during law school. And I think a lot of law schools have those kinds of programs, and they're very valuable because you get an invaluable experience. You're thrown right in the mix, and you're allowed to do things. You know, you've heard of imposter syndrome. You know, and many of us still say today, even though we've been doing whatever we've been doing for years, like I can't believe they let me do this, right? I mean, but then when you're in law school, then and you're defending somebody or prosecuting somebody, then you're really like, I can't believe they're letting me do this. um, but it was a great experience. So that's where it started during law school.
Awesome, awesome. So, if I kind of piece this story together, a Jewish kid grew up in Kentucky, moved down to Atlanta, then migrated kind of to New York acting school, and then found yourself in Southern Florida in Miami and going to law school, now practicing criminal law. You know, I guess as you kind of moved in those different geographical areas, because all those areas have like kind of their own personality. How did you find navigating all of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I came from Lexington, which I think growing up, maybe there were a couple 100,000 people, maybe 2 or 300,000 people. And so then I went to Emory. And even though it's in the South, the demographics of the university are not the same, like as Atlanta proper. I mean, there's a lot of Northeastern people. And I'm sure it's changed since I've been there. There's probably a lot more Latino people. There were a good amount of African Americans when I was there as well. A lot of Jewish kids. I think something like 50%. So that was like a radical change for me. Having grown up being one of two or three kids in a class. So most of what I experienced in Atlanta, and this was before the Olympics. Okay. And I haven't really spent time since there, but it's changed tremendously since I was there, because when I was there, it was just a black and white city, and that was it, and it seems like since then it's become much more cosmopolitan, all kinds of different people. It's not just so, this and that. It's like, it's much more rich and complex. So that was interesting. Then New York's New York, New York, I wasn't, regardless of where you go or if you're in a school, New York City, the city is the dominant thing. Like when I was at Emory, I'm in the bubble mostly of that, environment, as opposed to the city but New York is overpowering. So, New York it was awesome. I mean, it's awesome and it sucks at the same time, right? It's the best and the worst of everything. But I'm so glad I lived there for a year, that I had the opportunity, because it really is like going to school, like life school. You just learn so much about people. And then Miami, when I came to Miami 30 years ago, this was before, I don't know how old you are, but do you remember Elian Gonzalez?
Yeah.
The kid with Janet Reno, and the whole thing about the family, in Cuba, the dad and the family here wanted to keep him. And then at gunpoint, they had to go in the house and get him. And, so back in that time, Miami was, it was, I don't know what the percentage is. It's, Miami's like 80%, more than 80% Hispanic or Latino. I mean, it doesn't feel like the rest of, the United States, really. It's kind of different in that way. Which is great, because I love being in a place where the minority is the majority. Being that Jewish kid growing up in Kentucky, I like that. I appreciate that. But it was a very different place 30 years ago, because back then, kind of like Atlanta, it was just mostly Cuban Americans were the Hispanics, mostly, and they kind of drowned out everybody else politically. And that's the dominant voice that you would hear. And, everything was kind of, pointed at Cuba. And there was a large exile community that was very, had very strong feelings about Fidel Castro, and having had to leave their country and everything. So over the past 30 years, Miami has changed dramatically, because it's basically become the capital of South America or Latin America. And there's every, Spanish speaking person, Portuguese speaking person, Islander, here. And it's much more cosmopolitan than it was when I first came here. And it's never boring. It's a very interesting, it's an interesting place to live, to raise a family, to practice criminal defense, especially. It's an interesting place. Although I did miss the golden age of criminal defense in the 80s with the Scarface type.
Gotcha. So that brings me to a point that I think is very interesting for a lot of lawyers who go to law school, they practice law, and then when they start their law firm, it's just you know in a melting pot of a city. Like, how did you find navigating that process of building your law firm? Because, like, if you're in a place where, hey, you kind of get the idea, like in Lexington, kind of what to expect. It's not really known to be a melting pot, so people kind of build their firm one particular way. But when you're in a environment where there's so many different people, it's just like, how do you navigate that, getting the word out about your firm and like developing to serve just such a wide variety of clientele?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think, I think you need to learn Spanish. You need to speak Spanish. I mean, if you really, especially when you're coming out, like when I came out from the public defender's office, in the beginning of my career, after about 3 years there, 3.5 years, I started to use my Spanish one, in my work and with my clients, very basic, rudimentary. I never got past Spanish one. I took it probably through, junior high, high school, college. I never got past Spanish one. But anyways, but I, learning the language, I took it seriously when I left the public defender's office. I went to Costa Rica a couple times, to school, and I really applied myself. So I think that's one of the main things, is because when you start out, a lot of people start out, they don't have a secretary, they don't have a staff, it's a one-man show. And in some ways, the trend's kind of going back that way, with working from home and scaling back and et cetera. But it's a I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. You're letting me talk for too long, and that's what happens when I talk for too long.
So I was asking about, like, what it's like, of, like I said, building a firm in such a melting pot of an
Right.
area.
So I think you got to speak Spanish. I mean, if 80% of the people are Hispanic, even though some do speak English, you're at a disadvantage if you cannot communicate, if you cannot relate with your clients, right? So that was extremely important. And then other than that, I think all the basics, the fundamentals of marketing, apply here with equal force. You just have to be, they just need to be tweaked, or, just like anywhere, to try to get your message out. But like, I know one of the things you would like to focus on is they didn't teach us how to run a law firm when we were in law school. I mean, you kind of have to learn on the job, which is what I did. And it's either sink or swim, and you got to be smart, because there's a lot of competition out there.
Hmm. And I would say, I mean, with practicing for, but as you said, earlier, like 30 years, I mean, shows that you've been able to adapt through probably a lot of change that has happened over the 30 years. Were there any significant trends or changes that you saw that that you've had to navigate in that 30-year time frame to make sure that, hey, your law firm can still stay relevant to serve the clients well?
I would say more of the things that the changes were not challenges to me to stay relevant, but were just changes for the better in the way law is practiced. From the standpoint of electronic filing. When I started out, you would physically have to take 3 copies to the original and 2 copies to the clerk's office and file the original, get the other one stamped. And it was, when you think about it, it's hard to to remember that that's the way it really was, but it was like that until not that long ago. Zoom, during the pandemic, that pulled the legal industry kicking and screaming into this century, because it's got it, for criminal lawyers especially, and I think civil as well, that the amount of time you waste with going to hearings in person, and just standing in line and just, parking and hustle and bustle of the courthouse and then 2 minutes you're in front of the judge. I mean, literally 2 minutes. And then you have to drive back home and, so Zoom has been, a huge thing, huge change. And that's made, being able to practice as a sole practitioner much more efficient, just like electronic filing, not having to physically go and file things. So those are the main things that have, I think, changed, but for the better, to enable us to be in two places at once, to not be running around like a chicken with its head cut off, which is, the way it used to be really for a criminal defense attorney.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now one of the things that I also want to talk about is, kind of, the pre kind of show questions. One of the things that you mentioned about question of, what do you want people to know about you? And one of the things that you put is that I'm honest. And, I thought it was interesting because, unfortunately, when some people thinking about, criminal defense, honesty isn't the first thought that comes to mind. How have you found, like, being able to help, your clients as well as potential clients know that, hey, when they come to work with your firm, like, you're going to get a honest lawyer that will serve your interests and that will do what's right and be honest with you?
So, when I meet with people, you talk with a lot of people on the phone, in person, and, it can become tiresome. And so I think for a lot of attorneys, they kind of just get to the point of, this is how much it's going to be. And they don't take the time to really connect with the person and understand what's going on before you get to that subject. So I've always, even though it's exhausting and I can't do it, I can't do it all the time because I don't have the time or energy. I try to really take my time with people and make them understand that it's not about the money. It's not just about the money. It's about understanding what the situation they're in and how can I help the person, and giving them an honest assessment of what I think, the chances are of a certain outcome. Not promising, not telling them what they want to hear. Because, a lot of attorneys will tell people what they want to hear. And I pride myself on not doing that. I try not to be so much of a Debbie Downer that I don't get hired by people, but I try to be, as honest as I can to explain to them the situation because, as expectations in a client, expectations are really, really important. What are the client's expectations? Because, at some point you're going to be measured against them and whether you met them or not. And so I don't want there to be a lot of light between when I initially meet with them, they make the decision to hire me, and the final outcome. I want to make sure that they feel I was transparent with them from the very beginning and that they were responsible for their decisions, in the case and ultimately, where they ended up. And all I can do is do my best. Whatever they want to do, you want to sail in that direction, I'll tell you whether it's a good idea or not. What I think, I think it's probably better to go this way. But if you understand why I feel the way I do and I advise you not to, and you still want to go this way, okay, let's go that way. I'll do my best for you. And hopefully they, regardless of the outcome, they know that I did the best I could for them and that I was honest with them. And at the end of the day, when you put your head on the pillow, you want to be able to sleep at night. And, it's not about the money. It's not. I mean, it's necessary, it's consideration, but I don't know. I mean, to me, it's really the only path for long-term success in your business and, having a good reputation.
Awesome. So now if people are interested in learning more about you and your firm, like where should they look for you online?
Well, they can go to the edelsteinfirm.com. That's THEDELSTEIN, Edelstein, firm.com. There are links to my social media at the top of my website there. I'm on LinkedIn and, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. I'm easy to find. If you're looking for me, you'll find me pretty quick.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one final question I love asking every guest is, when you think about all the things, different things we've talked about and discussed, if you were telling someone like, hey, I was a guest on the Law and Finance show. Hey, when you listen to my interview, hey, here are 2 big takeaways that I want you to have from listening to that conversation. What would your 2 big takeaways be?
Be honest in hopefully in all facets of your life, but in your business, with your clients, with your employees, with opposing counsel, whoever you come in contact with, and I'm trying to think. I think when I was reading through the questions, about the interview, you said like what 2 business, important things you've learned in business that you would, you may want to share with people or other lawyers or young lawyers, coming out. One of those I thought about was as a criminal defense lawyer, when you quote your fee, don't chase the falling sword. Don't you know what I'm saying? Like you need to say, this is what I'm worth, and either they're going to hire you or they're not. Don't be desperate, because if they don't hire you, somebody else will hire you, and if you chase the, oh, you only have $500. Okay, I'll take that. And then you can pay me later and whatever, you're going to end up like the chicken with its head cut off, and you're going to have too many clients. You're not going to be able to service them with a level of, professionalism and advocacy that you would want. And ultimately that's going to reflect on your reputation. So I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I wish I would have understood it when I started out as a younger lawyer, is, price yourself, value yourself, your services. Don't undervalue what you have to offer, and try to have some integrity with your fees. And don't be the desperate guy at the bar, trying to pick up a girl. It's not very attractive. That's not the way, you pick up a girl, by being desperate. I mean, you need to stand in your shoes and be centered and know what you stand for and know what you do and have confidence. And, eventually, if you stick to your principles, you'll have clients, you'll have satisfied clients, and you'll have a good reputation because you have the time to work on the cases and to do a good job.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love it. Love it. Well, David, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me, Terrell.
If you're looking for ideas on how to manage and grow a profitable law firm, this Facebook group is perfect for you, because every week we are featuring conversations with successful lawyers and businesses related to law firms on tips, ideas, and technology that are helping many people grow and manage a profitable law firm. So if you're looking for great tips and ideas, you definitely want to click the link below so you can join the conversation and be part of the Law Firms and Finance Facebook group.